Millions of people across Europe are either self-isolating or facing mandatory lockdowns, border closures and bans on public gatherings. Deserted streets are becoming a common sight as the continent hunkers down amid the spread of the coronavirus pandemic, responsible for more than 6,000 deaths worldwide. For more, we are now joined by a correspondent in Brussels, Hough, who joins us. Good evening, Lucy, and welcome to The Full View. Can you tell us what the situation is currently in Spain as well as in France now that there has been a lockdown?
Yes, clearly this is a situation that is worsening, and the EU has taken some drastic steps to combat this across the bloc. It's proposing an EU-wide ban on its external border that would last 30 days. That's for any third-party travellers travelling in to the 26 member state Schengen zone, an area that has a freedom of movement within its internal border. But basically this would restrict anyone other than EU nationals, their families, diplomats and health workers. It's plans that have been unveiled in the last couple of hours. We heard rumours that the EU was considering such a measure, but it's almost unthinkable from 2 weeks ago, really, when this was absolutely ruled out, and particularly after the EU was highly critical of similar measures imposed by President Trump last week. But clearly the EU's hand has been forced by the worsening situation. As you mentioned, in Spain, measures stepped up there. It has gone into a fuller lockdown, given that it is now in a state of emergency. The cases there surpassing 9,000 and all but essential businesses now shut. So really it's just basic supermarkets and healthcare centres that are open there. France, we are due to hear from President Macron shortly. We are expecting that France will increase the measures that it has in place as the virus also continues to worsen there. Italy remains the epicentre of the virus in Europe. Cases there around 25,000 cases, but that is changing all the time. The number of that death toll increasing to 1,800 over the weekend, with a huge spike in the number of deaths. So clearly a worsening situation, and the one that the EU thinks can be contained with these stricter controls at its external border.
And speaking about Italy, yesterday we saw Italy reporting the highest number of deaths per day, 368. Are they speaking about any other measures that they are putting in place to try and contain the spread of the virus as well as the severity of it?
Well, Italy has been calling for the EU's help on this, particularly the provision of medical equipment. It's been calling for additional funding and for measures to mitigate the huge economic impact that it has experienced, something that the ECB, the European Central Bank, was criticised for last week when it unveiled a package of fiscal stimulus. It was seen as not having reached out to Italy sufficiently. So Italy itself has announced 25 billion euros to tackle the impact of the coronavirus, particularly with regards to healthcare systems, but also sectors that are likely to be hardest hit by the COVID-19 epidemic. But clearly with such disruption to the supply chain, with the countries on lockdown, every city now in quarantine, the economic impact of this is going to be huge. And now with these additional block-wide measures, clearly the hope is that with these much more stringent measures in place, that will start to bring the number of new cases down, the death toll down, but that is something that will play out over the coming days and weeks.
And what are we hearing from the European Union about the measures that are being put in place?
Well, so what we're hearing from the European Union is, as I say, it's a 30-day travel restriction that would apply to third-party travellers. So that's anyone other than EU citizens, diplomats, as well as healthcare professionals as well. It wouldn't apply to citizens of the UK as well, who for now are in a transition period. So Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission President, was saying today that as far as she's concerned, UK citizens are European citizens. So there is no restriction from Brits to travel into the continent at the moment. But Ursula von der Leyen said that there was the possibility that this could be extended if needed, depending on the level of whether the Europe continues to be hit as hard as it is at the moment. So this is something that can be assessed. What we do know is that the EU wants to keep its internal border open, so the freedom of goods, services and people within the Schengen zone. That is something that it wants to protect. What it wants to restrict is people from outside the bloc coming in. So we are hearing important messages to member states to keep that internal border open, not to put checks at the border. We know that Germany has already done so, however. Today it imposed restrictions on 5 of its neighbouring states, clearly concerned that they would bring more cases of the coronavirus in. So we are seeing divergences from member states, but the EU is being strong on its language here. It wants to keep those internal borders open, but it is clearly concerned about third-party travellers coming into the bloc at the moment.
And we'll be watching closely what Macron have to say about the measures that they are implementing. Lucy, thank you so much for your time.